Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today, we've got a very cool video for you. We've recently manually elevated the 3 barrels of turret number 3. This was a huge volunteer project that took several months to plan out and accomplish. Back in the early days of the museum, we had several volunteers who had served on ships like this in gunnery departments or knew these ships fairly well. In particular, we had a gentleman named Marty Waltmeyer who had worked on reactivating the gun turrets of all 4 Iowas in the 80s. Marty is still with us, thankfully, but he is mostly aged out from volunteering on board the ship. So, in the early 2000s, when the museum first opened, we elevated the barrels of turrets 1 and 2. When the ship comes to the museum in mothballs, the guns are all at 0 degrees elevation, and there is a metal plate that covers the opening in the faceplate where the guns could elevate. And that's part of the sealing the ship up. The bloomers that normally cover that hole, the rubberized canvas bags essentially that go over the ends of the muzzle, were found in the officer's wardroom. So pretty early on, the museum chose to uncover those plates, reinstall the ship's original bloomers, and then put the guns at the saluting angle, which is normally 20 degrees. Iowa-class battleships are able to elevate their guns to 45 degrees, so it's pretty common that the saluting angle would be somewhere around 15 or 20 degree mark on various ships. This keeps the guns up out of the deck, keeps them out of the way, and it just looks better as the ship is sailing around. A huge part of maintaining the battleships in service, especially at the end of their career, was the wow factor that they put off. To continually get funding from Congress to keep maintaining a ship this old, they had to put out a significant wow factor. So the guns are kept at this angle, normally in service. So in the early days of the museum, our volunteers got together and they got the bloomers back on the gun barrel, which may have involved some rocking it back and forth, which was a manual process. Obviously, we don't have electrical power going to the electro-hydraulic motors that are normally used to elevate or rotate the guns. And they were able to manually rock the turrets back and forth, or the individual barrels back and forth to get the bloomers on there. And once that was all secured, they elevated the forward 2 barrels to 20 degrees. We'll talk about why that angle was chosen later on. And they elevated the aft gun to just 5 degrees. We're not entirely sure why that first generation made those decisions, but I've got some guesses. First, here's a message from the sponsor of today's video, Magic Spoon. Running around the battleship every day of the week, I build up a mighty hunger. So that's why I like that we're sponsored by Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon is cereal reinvented. You can build your own variety box and choose from your favorite cereals, including the best-selling Cocoa, Fruity, Frosted, Peanut Butter, Cookies and Cream, and Maple Waffle flavors. Plus, other awesome flavors including Honey Nut, Blueberry Muffin, and Birthday Cake and Cinnamon Roll. You can even add Cookies and Cream and Cocoa Peanut Butter flavor cereal bars to your variety box. Magic Spoon comes with 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs per serving. The Honey Nut cereal does have 1 gram of sugar in it. Magic Spoon cereal bars have 1 gram of sugar, 10 grams of protein, 4 net grams of carbs, and only 130 calories per bar. The cereal has only 140 calories per serving. They're also keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. Click the link below to get some Magic Spoon cereal today. You can build your very own variety box and use my code BATTLESHIP for $5 off. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. Also, for those of you who watch from Canada or Great Britain, Magic Spoon also ships to those countries. Today we're on the battleship's mess decks, where they would have served 4 meals a day: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and midrats, or midnight rations. Personally, midrats is my favorite time to eat cereal. The guns have locking pins that will hold the barrels at their right elevation for 20 degrees and then higher up on this bulkhead at 0 degrees, so that all of the weight from this mechanism isn't permanently just transferred down into the machinery that is elevating it and holding it in place. So it can be locked there. Also, with those set locking positions, it allows you to calibrate the guns from those positions. If you have that exactly machined perfectly, you know what 20 degrees is, you can take all your calibrations at that angle and know that everything's good. So that is your saluting position for keeping the guns normally. That's why it was chosen for the forward tube barrels. The museum's original curator, I believe, would have been the one who made the call to keep turret 3 at 5 degrees. 5 degrees is the loading angle for Iowa-class battleships. So by keeping these guns at that angle, it allowed visitors to see a loading tray in place, a breech open, a shell or powder bags being ready to be rammed into the gun. The problem is, this could only be seen from a single small porthole from the gun house looking into the turret. And many of our guests have already gone into turret 1, so by the time they get to the aft end of the ship at the end of their tours, they're not going in turret 3. We just aren't seeing that many guests going in turret 3. So it was decided that the educational benefit of having the guns at that elevation was not worthwhile, especially when compared to the visual look of the ship, where turret 3 was just too low compared to the forward two. Plus, we essentially have a new generation of volunteers maintaining these guns. So a little bit of it was proof of concept. The next time a film company comes on board and wants to film the guns elevated or something like that, do we actually know how to do it? So that's a great way to make money for the ship if people come out and ask for that. Battleship Massachusetts pretty famously got to elevate some of the barrels of turret 3 on that ship for the Netflix original movie Don't Look Up, which was partially filmed on board a scene with Ron Perlman, what would that have been, back in 2020 or 2021, I believe. So this stuff does happen. Iowa, being in Los Angeles, gets approached by film companies all the time. Missouri probably has her own IMDb page now after all the movies that she's been in. So it makes sense keeping this knowledge on how to elevate and depress these guns as needed. So the first thing it took to get these guns ready to go was to break down the spanner tray that was in them so that we could close the breech. The spanner tray had powder bags on it, so we had to move those out of the way, replica powder bags. So they got moved out of the way. And then all of these features, the breech, the spanner tray, the gun itself, they're all electrohydraulic. So there is hydraulic fluid in there that assists you in opening them. So one of the things we had to do was open some valves to allow that hydraulic fluid to move freely. Well, the problem is, without any pressure from the hydraulic fluid, without the electric motors being used, we had the full weight of these objects to maneuver manually. So the next stage was we had to rig a chain fall up to the spanner tray so that we could pull it from the loading position back up into the normal position. So it took a couple of volunteers, some work to get this chain fall rigged up, and of course they had to reposition the chain fall a couple times as they raised it. It was a similar process after that to get the breech of the gun elevated and locked back in place. But we didn't just want to do this on a whim. We prefer to have our spaces ventilated, not enclosed. That allows things to dry out if they get water in them. The ends of the barrels are still plugged by the Navy from when the ship was mothballed. And we did not mess with that at all. So this gun barrel had been open to the elements. The turrets are not climate controlled, so it's fluctuating temperature in here. It is open to the public, so it's not like we had the door sealed to run dehumidification. So once we were ready to close the breech of the gun, the first thing we had to do was clean it all up, wipe off the old lubricating oil that was on there that had become very gummy at this point. Remember, it's been over 30 years since it was applied. Clean up any rust that was there, and then apply new lubricating oil so that when we seal this, it's not going to either glue itself back in place with the oil or rust fuse together as it corrodes. Once that was done, we could pull the breech closed and lock that in place. Now, with all three breeches closed, all of the spanner trays out of the way, the next step was to actually go into the gun pits and elevate the guns. Gearing right here is what the gun elevates up and down on. So this piece of pipe is how you could manually do that. You notice it just comes up to an angle and goes right into that gear. So all it takes is a regular pipe wrench like this. And we found that this one was working just fine with the amount of lubricant we were putting on these gears. Although we did have a significantly bigger wrench that we could use as a breaker bar if needed. But this proved to be just fine. You could lock it on here and then turn. And it ended up taking roughly a half hour to an hour, depending on the barrel. Believe it or not, they weren't all the same looseness. Some of them were harder to raise than others. But half hour to an hour to go from 5 degrees to 20 degrees. So next, our volunteers took turns cranking on this to get it up to the right position. And then once the locking pin lined up with the hole, if you notice there are weird footholes cut into the bulkhead here. This is to access the locking pin. So you climb up here and there is a wheel right here. And under this, you can see the pin going into the hole. And I'm not sure we're going to be able to get this on film, but above that and behind it is the hole for if this was at 5 degrees. So now, all 9 of our gun barrels are set at the same angle. And we have relearned, for the second time as a museum, how to do this. And now we've got a group of volunteers who know the process of how to do this for if we need to do it in the future or get the opportunity to do it in the future. And, of course, we've documented the whole process, although they were largely using the Navy's documentation to figure it out. But we have now redocumented it so that when another generation from now, when there's a new curator, a new group of volunteers, and they decide they need to do this again for whatever reason, we are able to do that. So, what angle do you like? Do you like seeing them at the original saluting position like we have on New Jersey? Do you like seeing them in multiple positions like turret 3 on USS Massachusetts? Or do you like what Iowa did where one of their guns is still at the 0 degree mark and you can actually see the muzzle when you're taking the tour? Let us know in the comment section down below which you think is the most educational, which is the most visually striking. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. In particular, we'd like to thank Magic Spoon for supporting today's video. Remember to use the link in the description below for more information. You can also support Battleship New Jersey by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about us and our channel. Thanks for watching.